Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sword and Sorcery Fantasy Adventure Show. Today we're going to look at the character that started it all. Conan the Cimmerian, Conan the Barbarian. He goes by many names. But for me, my first introduction of the character was, like for many other children of the 80s, in the 1982 John Milius film, Conan the Barbarian, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. To understand the time, you have to look at cinema as being not what it is today, but what it used to be. For kids like me, movies were everything. Absolutely everything. I used to get physically ill before I saw a film. That's how much I loved them. I'd seen Empire Strikes Back, and my life had gone from this to this. I think we followed that up by Raiders of the Lost Ark and maybe even Clash of the Titans. So when Flash Gordon came along, I remember it vividly. I was about 7 or 8, and Mum took myself, my brother, and a couple of other friends to the State Theatre in Sydney. Now, the State Theatre is a very beautiful, grand Art Deco cinema. The moment you walk in there as a kid, you start to get that feeling. For me, it was a feeling of illness. As the lights dimmed and the ads started, I remember I was feeling sick, and Mum took me to the toilets, and I was ill. When I returned, my brother was shaking his head at me. Partly what a coward you are, and partly you just missed something absolutely amazing. I said, what? He told me about a preview for a film called Conan. And I could see in his eyes and hear in his voice something utterly amazing. When we got into the foyer, of course, we were incensed by Flash Gordon. It is a fantastic film, still one of my favorites of all time. But I remember him pointing at the poster, at the Conan poster. And that was my first introduction to the sword and sorcery art, and my first introduction to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that had a profound effect. We didn't see it at the movies, but a couple of years later, it was on home video. Now, it's important to really look at the impact that Conan the Barbarian had not only on me as a filmmaker with my movie Quest for Steel, but for many other, and I'm going to say young men at the time, adolescents. I've talked before about going to a all-boys school and the melancholic longings of youth. So having a film about a barbaric rites of passage resonated with young guys like me. Later on, when I was about 16, 17, I got into bodybuilding. So Arnold, of course, was this great role model for many of us. But I got into bodybuilding, and I remember I happened across an autobiography by a gentleman called Sam Fussell. I call him Sam Fussell. His name might be Sam Fussell. Let's call him Sam Fussell. It's called The Confessions of an Unlikely Bodybuilder. And it's about an American-born Oxford graduate that returns to New York and suffers from extreme anxiety. And one day in the peak of a panic attack, he finds himself in the solace of a bookstore where he happens across Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. And he sees a man who's built an armor, and he dedicates himself to the next few years to becoming a competitive bodybuilder. What makes this book so interesting is that he looks at Conan and the works of Robert E. Howard as a Bible to how a warrior lives. And in one instance, he is on his way to work. He works for a publishing company, and he's in a situation. There's a wormy guy next to him, and there's a narrow doorway. And I believe there's a standoff. They're both being polite. But Sam Fussell looks at this situation as the warrior must always be in control. So rather than be at the behest of his imagined captor, he proceeds to lift his challenger high above his head and then hurls him through the doorway, thus demonstrating what both the top and the bottom of the food chain looks like. That was Sam Fussell's reading of Robert E. Howard and Conan. Conan is savage, there's no denying it. But a closer read shows Conan not to be a macho, for want of a better word. He's not a macho, he's a guardian of the downtrodden. See, Conan wouldn't hurl someone through a doorway just because of defiant courtesy. He would only do that if that person was a bully. And that is what macho men get wrong. So to sum up, Conan is not the muscle man at your gym. Conan is the man walking the street, correcting the bullying behavior of the macho man. And that is what makes him so unique. Now, much has been said about Milius's depiction of Conan in the movie, how it goes a little against the grain of Robert E. Howard. And I would tend to agree with them. But the adaptation adds to the mythology of Conan in only the way that pure cinema can. That sequence at the start where Conan looks into the eyes of pure evil and loses both his parents, I think that is up there with Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West's Family Massacre for both pure evil and planting the seeds for cold-hearted revenge. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was perfect as Conan. As the saying went, if they couldn't get Arnold to play Conan, they would have to build a Conan. Thank you very much, and please subscribe to this channel, because you like sword and sorcery, you like fantasy adventure, and this is going to be a weekly show where we discuss this. And when I say discuss, please understand that I'm using the term sword and sorcery as an umbrella to cover a lot of high fantasy and other terrain. So there's no need to be literal, no need to say, well, technically you're not talking about this, and that's not what I'm about. I'm about talking about works that have influenced me, that have meant something to me, that I love, and I'm hoping to share that with you in this forum. But anyway, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
To wield bronze is to breathe it, understand it, worship it. It's the material our idols are made from. Our statues, our gods. It's forged in fire, the gift from the great god Organ. And it has no respect for your wood, No pity, no mercy. Anyone can pick up a stick, shape it, shave it. But real weapons. Real weapons. They're not plucked from trees.
Be the first to know about screenings. Email your first name and what city you are in, and we will tell you when Quest for Steel is coming to your town.